All right, sports fans, welcome back to another episode of Plugged In with Chris Howard. And as I try to do so often, I try to bring on people that classes up the podcast, make us look a little bit more established than we actually are. And this week is no different. I got my man on, author Tyler Dunne. Tyler, what's going on, buddy?
What is up, Chris? It's an honor to be here talking with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, man, awesome, man. I want to talk to you. Well, one of the reasons, obviously, we're here to talk is to discuss your new book, "The Blood and Guts: How Tight Ends, Saved the Sport." And I remember reading the title, and of course, as a former running back, I'm like, come on now, really, tight ends save the sport? Like, that's just the competitive side of me. But then as I started to read the book, I'm like, oh shit, like he's right. They did, and it's an amazing book, man. And I really appreciate your effort, your hard work that you put into this, because you do such an amazing job just humanizing athletes, right? And you and I were talking about this earlier. My knowledge as far as some of the greats literally comes from, NFL films and stuff that I've watched on YouTube, or Al Michaels back in the day doing his thing with sports stories, or Brian Gumble covering some sports stories. So that was the extent of my knowledge of some of these guys. Obviously, Jeremy Shockey and those guys, but that's more my generation. But when you go back to Mike Ditka and Ozzie Newsome and Jackie Smith, who honestly, that's probably my favorite chapter so far in the book. But you do such an amazing job at humanizing these guys. And I just want to say thank you, man, because this is kind of what sports needs.
Hey, man, I really appreciate that, Chris. That's 100% the lens I always try to operate through when it comes to sports writing. I mean, I've been writing features for a while now. I think like 06, 07 is when I started covering the NFL. And it really does piss me off when a lot of fans, media, outsiders look at you guys as cogs in this machine. I mean, the NFL looks at you as that, and it's you're faceless, soulless names to plug into a fantasy football lineup, and it's not right. It doesn't do you justice. It doesn't do the NFL players justice when you're playing a game. You're putting your life on the line. I mean, you're putting your brain on the line, your body on the line. It's your modern day gladiators in so many ways, and it's I feel like everybody has a story, obviously, but the only way that you can really drive that home and humanize a sport that deserves to be humanized is by sitting down with a Jackie Smith, a Mike Ditka.
So Tyler, man, you had an opportunity to sit down with some of the greatest to ever play the game. But before we jump into that, what was the kickoff for you to say, this is the book that I want to write? Like, what was the start of this process for you?
I really think it starts in, okay, why do we watch football, right? We all have a reason for tuning in on Sunday. Maybe it's something trivial like, a gambling bet or a fantasy football lineup, or, a favorite team. To me, it's like we watch football because of that element of violence, because only a select few people can walk onto that field and smash into other human beings for their day job. I mean, you've been there. It's really strange. I thought George Kittle put it best when he said, it's just not normal to wake up in the morning, go to training camp, like with your coworkers out in the field, get into a fight, beat the snot out of each other, like literally throw punches. And then, 20 minutes later, you're in the cold tub and you're talking about each other's wife and kids and, oh, how's life? It's not normal. You don't see this in other professions. So like, it's rooted in that violence, that physicality. And I get it. It might sound a little rough around the edges and callous to say, but it's the truth. Like, until you make it touch football, that's why we're tuning in. It's that octagon. This isn't meant for everybody, right? You're taking on that risk. So, that being why I played myself and watched myself and love covering this game. It does get frustrating to see it change. And I think the last 10, 15 years, it's like the NFL is in this weird identity crisis. Like, what do we want the product to really resemble? We want to try to convince mom at home to let Joey play, and yet also want to address very real concussion concerns. I mean, there's been a lot of good that comes with it, but I think they're trying to find a middle ground that doesn't exist. And if they were just honest, if they just owned the violence, if they just kind of were upfront with the players and the public and said, yes, like this does have risk. You will get hurt playing this game. It's not safe. I think the NFL will be better for it. I mean, if you just kind of own what you are as a brand, as a product. So it kind of started with a little concern over what's the future of the sport, and then what can save it. And I get it. The linemen are in the trenches. They're beating each other up 60, 70 plays a game. But the tight end does that with personality, with fun, with catching a 30, 40-yard pass downfield and dancing your ass off in the end zone. So it has that flavor with what is drawing us to the sport, that violence. And I figured I'll just travel the country, hang out with Mike Ditka to George Kittle, everybody in between, and really see how is the tight end preserving what we love about football and all the elements that go into it. And as we were kind of talking before we hit record, I kind of started with a football mission, but it became like a book that's more about life. And I found myself staring into the mirror, contemplating like my own life and decisions I've made, decisions I will make, our purpose on this planet. Dallas Clark, Jimmy Graham, Tony Gonzalez, Jackie Smith, they'll send you that place very soon. So I think that this book really can appeal to people who do love the X's and O's and the nitty gritty of the sport. But also, if you're just trying to figure out, your purpose in the morning, when you wake up, how you attack the day, I think this book can be for you too.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I was going to say, because if it felt like out of all the positions, you kind of picked the least glamorous one, I guess. Or maybe not the least glamorous, but the one that obviously I think in the beginning didn't get much attention. But as the evolution of the tight end position has, obviously evolved, they have become more of a focal point in the offense, especially when it comes to draft day. You're seeing tight ends get drafted in the first round. You're seeing a more value being put on the tight end position, just like years ago, like how offensive tackle was, right? Like everybody wanted to make sure they had bookend tackles. Now everyone wants to make sure they got that new breed of tight end that can line up 3-point stands, 2-point stands, that can flex out. And so talk to me a little bit about why you absolutely zeroed in on the tight end position.
Yeah, because I get it, right? Like tight end, you kind of grew up and remember it was just, maybe Ben Coates and Shannon Sharp in the 90s. It was Tony Gonzalez kind of came on. He started evolving the position. I get it. It's like, what is this position? I think Dallas Clark put it best. We're kind of the redheaded stepchild. Like the linemen don't like us because we're stepping on their toes in the run game. The receivers don't like us because we're taking targets away from them. Who even likes me here? He became really good friends with the specialists and the kickers, like Nate Cadian in Iowa and Vinatieri, and then the long snapper, the holder in Indy. Just because it's like you don't fit in. It's like you're in the cafeteria at lunchtime. Where do I sit here? I'm not with this group of jocks or that group of nerds or whatever. But to me, that's kind of what makes the tight end position different and valuable and so core to the NFL. It does kind of force you, like, as Tony Gonzalez put, to do the shit you don't want to do. Tony Gonzalez didn't want to roll up his sleeves and get in the trenches and bash into D ends. Like, he wanted to do what he was doing with KC in Atlanta, evolve and make the position special down the field, pluck a football atop somebody's head, make that acrobatic play. Nobody at the position really forced it to evolve like Tony Gonzalez did when he came on. Yet he's the first to say it makes you a better human being, because you just every day when you wake up in the morning, there's going to be some shit you don't want to do. There's chores around the house. Like you're going to have to pay some bills. You're going to have to do the grit and the grime. Nobody really enjoys it, and we got people in the book, I guess, who enjoy it. Mark Bruner for one. He was that grit and grimer in the 90s. But for overall, it just kind of forces you to do that stuff. So I think that combination of, okay, you're going to have to block. You're going to have to take on a DN. You're going to have to roll up your sleeves. Yet, not only that, when it's 3rd and 10 and it's the fourth quarter and the season's on the line, you're going to have to make that play downfield. You're often going to be that go-to guy that needs to make a play. So that's football. I mean, you kind of have to do a little bit of everything. You know, a diva wide receiver out wide, how often are they really going to be crackback blocking and making a play that springs? Maybe one, maybe two, that springs a big run. And a lineman, you're doing your job if nobody's talking about you for 3 hours on the broadcast. The tight end's visible, you know, because you do have to make those plays, yet you still have to do that 9 to 5 grunt kind of work. So that's probably why I picked tight end. It really is the sport distilled to one position where you have to do everything. So if the position's going to stay alive, or the game is going to stay alive and remain football, it's going to be alive and well most at the NFL tight end position.
Yeah, and you talk. I love how you kind of lay out everything, starting with Mike Ditka, and just kind of sticking with that. What was it about the position that they felt like at that time that there needed to be a change, right? Like who was the architect, so to speak, to say that, you know what, we can do more with this position than just having this guy line up and be an extension of the offensive line? Like what was the need? Who was the architect behind that?
There are names that nobody's heard. A lot of names, right? That Luke Johnsos, Chicago Bears offensive coordinator. I didn't know who the hell that was. I don't think many people do, right? In the early 1960s. Granted, George Halas was the head coach, and you know he has the final say. I mean, he ran the Chicago Bears for decades. But Mike Ditka really points to a man named Luke Johnsos for having the vision to say, okay, this end. And at that point, 1960, 1961, you had ends and then you had split ends. There wasn't a tight end. You know, the split end is what Raymond Berry with the Baltimore Colts making plays down the field.
Mm-hmm.
Don Hudson before that with the Green Bay Packers. And then the end, you know, there were some ends who caught some passes, but it was 4 or 5 yards and a cloud of dust. It was maybe you run a little route, you catch a ball, then you fall down. They weren't thought of as pass receivers. So tight end doesn't exist until Mike Ditka exists and John Mackey exists. And when they come out in the 60s, it takes that innovation of a Luke Johnsos to say, okay, off of the line, you're going to have a two-way release. You know, you can run a route to the left or you can run a route to the right. And once you run a route, we're going to throw you the ball and then you can take over. You can become this apex predator on the field as Mike Ditka was. If he approached it that way, if you talk shit to him, he knew and he made you pay. Same thing. If you went after one of his teammates, he knew and he made you pay. We've got a lot of stories in there on that. But I think the fact that these are two tight ends who could not only catch that pass, but then run over 4 or 5 guys. And granted, it was a different time. It's so funny. Like you look back at those highlights, some of these guys trying to tackle Ditka and Mackey. I mean, they must have been like milkmen on the side or like, you know, shoemakers. It's no knock. I don't want to like, you know, knock that era because if anything, during this project, I gained an appreciation for football in the 60s. Like I'd always kind of like lift my nose up. Oh, that wasn't real. No, it was real football.
It was a man's sport back then. I mean, it was really a man's sport back then. I mean, it was obviously, like you said, it was a different era, but I mean, given like, you know, just the complete disregard for human life back then, the equipment, the spikes on their shoes. I mean, it was a brawl in a bar, but happening on a football field.
That's exactly it. I mean, in 2022, the players are bigger, faster, stronger than ever, and are going to do some irreparable damage to each other, but it's within some semblance of law. There was not that in the 60s. I mean, Ray Nitschke is clotheslining Mike Ditka at every opportunity, and Ditka's loving it. He's like, yeah, I didn't even consider that dirty. Like he didn't consider the clotheslines dirty. He liked it in a weird way. So it starts with that innovation, that Luke Johnsos, that George Halas. Okay, we're going to let you do your thing down the field. And then they had to be called tight ends because it wasn't just an end blocking. It's a split end in there in tight making plays. And I think that Don Shula with the Baltimore Colts had a lot to do with things where, I mean, at Syracuse, John Mackey wasn't this prolific receiver. He was kind of a running back. He was kind of a tight end. Don Shula had that vision for him making plays down the field, and he did it instantly. And then, not to get ahead of myself, but I think that Jackie Smith is somebody that gets lost in time, where he came on in the 60s. And to this day, no tight end has a better yards per reception than Jackie Smith. And he's like a full 2 yards better than Tony Gonzalez. So for him, a longtime track star, back in Kentwood, Louisiana, where he's running on not even dirt tracks. They ran around the football field, and there was one spot on that track where like water leaked. So it was not exactly like all weather tracks of today, but he ran like a gazelle. He only played college football because the college track coach said, all right, I'll take you on and give you a scholarship if you play football. St. Louis Cardinals just take a chance on him late in the draft. He didn't really play much in college. And lo and behold, in that offense, his speed was just hell on wheels to deal with. I mean, he could run for days. I mean, he just never got tired. In the fourth quarter, when everybody else was tired, Jackie Smith just kept going and going and going. And you see his numbers just skyrocketed and took the tight end position to a new realm in terms of, okay, 15, 20, 25 yards down the field, this player at this position can be a weapon.
Yeah. The Jackie Smith chapter is by far, I think, my favorite chapter. I think just because as you're talking about it right now, the numbers that he put up are not what we remember him for, right? The what he was able to do for the tight end position is not what's shown on every highlight, right? He's best known for the drop in Super Bowl 27, right? And I read that story, man, and the chapter is called A Mindset. And, he talks about, him coming to a realization that, I think he said they can kill you, but they can't eat you, right? Just talking about all the grief that he had got from that one play. But I love how you lay out how there were other things that happened in that game that really caused them to lose that game. It never came down to that drop. It wasn't about the drop. It was about the yards given up in that play, right? I think Dallas had the number 2 ranked defense or something like that, or number 5 ranked defense, but yet Pittsburgh threw for like 300 and something yards, 3 touchdowns. Like, there were other things that happened in that game that led up to that moment, but that moment happened in the third quarter. So it wasn't like this was the play that sealed the game or lost the game, but it's the one play that is the most remembered. And I wonder if, and I know Jackie talks about how he views it now as it's just a game, but how long did it take for him and what he had to go through to come to that realization?
That's probably one of the biggest shocks I had in this project, and talking to all 15 of these tight ends, where it's like, this play happens in 1979, I believe. And as you said, there's so much more that goes into it. I mean, Roger Staubach threw a bad pick, I believe. Randy Smith had a bad fumble on a kick return. And even the play itself, it wasn't all Jackie Smith's fault. It looks bad because he's so wide open, but that play is something that the Cowboys ran at the goal line. They just put it in. They never ran it at the 10-yard line. It was Jackie Smith was like the 4th option who'd kind of go to the back end line of the end zone and just kind of wait there if nothing else worked out, where all right, he gets open and Roger Staubach is almost stunned that he's so open, and Jackie Smith's running his route fast like he always would. And so they're not on the same page. It's kind of fluttered. It's kind of floated. And Jackie Smith, boom, he hits the brakes, he slips, he drops it. And then there's all the iconic imagery of him like levitating off of the turf. Vern Lundquist's call, bless his heart, of Tom Landry, the stoic coach who hardly blinked through his entire career. He throws his head back, and Roger Staubach throws his head back. There's so much that kind of goes into it, where it was almost mythologized over the years of, this is a Super Bowl GOAT. Biggest moment of any football player's career, all the bright lights, everything on the line, and he blew it. And it wasn't fair, right? Because of all these factors.
Right.
And it wasn't fair because Jackie Smith is a Hall of Famer. who evolved the tight end position, who was an unbelievable talent for the St. Louis Cardinals his entire career through the 60s, through the 70s. He's 38 at that point. You know, he didn't catch a pass through the season. He was there to block. He was chasing one more ring. He should have retired. I mean, he had a serious neck injury where, I mean, the Cowboys put him through a physical that lasts 15 minutes. And the doctors, according to
Was a
Jackie
farmer.
Smith, like,
I read
he
that,
just
man,
rushed
and
him
I
through
was
and he did
cracking
cattle
up
off to
laughing.
auction.
Like the doctor was a farmer, and so he had to like go, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you're fine," and then he had to like go like do something on his farm. Like, man, let me tell you, there's so many moments in the book where I like laugh out loud, like I'm like sitting in my office and I'm reading, and then all of a sudden there's just like this outburst of laughter, like throughout the entire book. But that was, yeah, man, that was hilarious. And again, it's like, again, as you lay out that play, all not the play, but as you lay out the game itself, there were other moments that happened in that game that were far bigger moments than that drop. It wasn't like it was, the field goal to win the game or anything like that. There were other moments that led up to that. And I just man, I felt like really bad. I was telling you earlier, I said, man, listen, I almost teared up reading that chapter because you could feel the pain and the baggage that he's been carrying for all these years. And I'm glad that he seems to be doing better now. He seems to really enjoy like more time with his family, because that play really affected how he interacted with his family.
Completely. I mean, that's the tragedy of it all. 5.5 seconds, I think the play lasted, and it almost just blows up 2 decades of dominance into smithereens. It's what everybody defines Jackie Smith as. You know, he's harassed, his family's harassed, his name and that play come up every February, every time the Super Bowl rolls around. I mean, Jackie Smith tried to kind of numb it, I think, for years and for decades. I mean, he took on various jobs and, all these different projects, had a restaurant. He sang the national anthem at sporting events. He sold fishing shows, and he couldn't shake that play. And this is somebody who, he doesn't regret anything. He's so glad that football brought so much to his family and his loved ones. And he must have said a million times in our conversation, like, I'm the luckiest man alive. Like, look at this family. But he admitted it wasn't really until 2020, like 2 years before our conversation, that Jackie Smith looked in the mirror and said, man, you are one stupid son of a bitch, in his words. Like, snap out of it, Jackie.
Wow.
Love your family, love your kids, be there, have these conversations. I mean, he was genuinely jacked up to just see his daughter the next day. And one of his old friends from back in the day called him while we were hanging out. And I mean, the glow on Jackie Smith's face to hear from somebody that he thought had passed away and meant so much. I think really he opened up, and you mentioned having tears in your eyes like I did. He had tears in his, where you could see how he let those 5.5 seconds negatively affect him when he was actively trying his best to not, right? He didn't just wallow in self-pity and bring it up himself mentally, but he couldn't shake it. He allowed it to affect his relationships. I don't think he did anything that was cathartic. He didn't like sit down with somebody for a 30 for 30. He did do a story with Sports Illustrated, which is fantastic. Ben Baskin wrote it a few years ago. It maybe that helped to a large extent, but he never really had that opportunity to just unburden himself, right? Put it all out there. And it took that moment looking in the mirror to finally once and for all bury that and leave it in the past. And I think right now at 82 years old, he is in a really good place. He does it by spending time with his family. He does it by working out. Like he said, he's on the Stairmaster. He's throwing weights around. He's staying unbelievably active because he feels like just putting in that work, he owes it to the game and his family to put something in physically to life, to get something out of life. It's definitely a conversation, man, that I'll never forget till the day I die.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Tyler, talk to me about what's your favorite chapter in this book.
That's a great question, Chris. I got to think. All of these guys were so fun in their own way, so moving in their own way, right? Like Jimmy Graham growing up in a group home, fearing for his life, getting beat up in the back of a van, because he's at a group home where there were a lot of troubled teens, and he's 2-3 years younger, and he's not there for anything he did wrong. His mom just didn't want him. His mom just dumped him off and wanted nothing to do with Jimmy Graham.
Yeah.
To come out of that place, Dallas Clark, to come out of where he did, where his mom dies in his arms right around his high school graduation. And like, where do you go in life from that point? He didn't really have a good relationship with his dad. I mean, he's just this try-hard kid from nowhere, Iowa. And what he did from that point forward, I really do think defined the tight end position as much as anything. We get into the play-by-play, the grit that he had to somehow make it at Iowa, mowing the stadium, selling the campus newspaper, serving as a test dummy for psychology students just to make $50 here, $50 there. It's surreal. I mean, he was a real life Rudy. He's more Rudy than Rudy was, I feel like, Dallas Clark. And I'm filibustering here because I'm trying to figure out, you know what? I got to put this right up there. But Jeremy Shockey, right? Like, he's somebody we haven't heard Angel. Much from. Who, I mean, I imagine you might have a Shockey story or two, but where the game was at the turn of the century, it was pretty critical. It's like, okay, football, you're starting to see a few more of those flags, and it's starting to change a little bit. And then in comes this linebacker playing tight end who is Mike Ditka. I mean, he is that same shark, lion, apex predator who wants to catch a pass and run you over and send you into tomorrow. At the U, that's the way he approached it. With the Giants, that's the way he approached it. I mean, he loved fighting, from, bar fights. We're hanging out at Miami Beach at a yard house, and he's giving me the play-by-play for a bar fight, his epic one, where a dude throws a bottle at him and then approaches him, and Jeremy Shockey just lights this MFer up, just bashes his face in, like, does severe damage to him. He's in high school at this point, Jeremy Shockey. And then the funny part is that guy, like, to go to the doctor to get his face checked out, the nurse there is Jeremy Shockey's mom. So she's like covering up her name.
Oh, that's hilarious. That's hilarious.
But that's probably my favorite, because I feel like Shockey's a guy, he was almost larger than life, when he was with the New York Giants. And yeah, he made 4 Pro Bowls. He won a Super Bowl with the Giants, with the Saints. But by and large, I don't think people have heard, many of the untold stories when it comes to Jeremy Shockey and what he really was like behind the scenes, and how he attacked the position and attacked life. It kind of blew me away. Everything from, yeah, he was this playboy dating models and all that, but like, he almost would punish himself if he was out drinking or out partying. He'd wake up in the middle of the night and just bang out 100 push-ups, right? Like, and he never actually dated anybody because he thought it would take away from his profession and what he's out there with teammates who are his brothers, and he genuinely wants to die for on the field. The injuries he played through are insane. He almost lost his leg when he was with the New York Giants, and nobody really knew that. He gets into the injury that ended it all with the Giants. But I feel like that conversation probably is most memorable, Chris, because it's like, he walks into a bar and it was like stepping into a hurricane for 2.5 hours. One story after another. He's talking a mile a minute. It's crazy his brain can keep up with his mouth as fast as he's talking about noodling back in Ada, Oklahoma, and his upbringing, the battles with his brother. And the reason I think he has such a significance to the preservation of the sport itself is, Shockey didn't put up the statistics of a Tony Gonzalez. I mean, he just beat the hell out of himself. He wasn't going to last. But you had a whole generation of young football players idolizing the way he played and the way he just lived hard and played hard and left it all out there. And who was one of those players? But Rob Gronkoswi here in Buffalo, New York. And Rob is writing Jeremy Shockey a letter and idolizing him in so many ways. And then obviously Rob took everything Jeremy Shockey was to a totally different stratosphere, where his game is something that we've never really seen as a blocker, as a receiver. I think he's the greatest ever. And yes, he's partying his ass off. He's right. Posing for photos with a porn star in the second year of his career. And after they lose the Super Bowl, is still going to the party and taking off his shirt and going nuts. And guess what? If Teddy Bruschi and Rodney Harrison and Richard Seymour, and if any former player didn't like that, He doesn't care. So for
Right.
Rob Gronkowski then to live and play hard and have the unabashed authenticity that he did, to do that, I think with the New England Patriots and Bill Belichick in a place where we all think you're mindless and soulless and you're robotic and you do what you're told, and to do that preserves football too, right? Like football should be fun, and Rob Gronkowski made sure it was fun.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, especially with New England, because New England was such a button up, professional. We're going to do things a certain type of way. Because I remember Belichick actually like getting rid of guys that he thought had too much personality, who he thought guys were kind of too much me guys as opposed to team guys. But I think that speaks to Gronkowski's abilities, that he can do all the me stuff he wants as long as he produces on the field, right? And we talk about the evolution of the tight end position. Where does the tight end position go next? Like what athlete are we going to see next? Because again, just like with basketball, just like with any sport, the players continue to evolve. The position continues to evolve. Where are we going to see the tight end position go next, or have we hit that ceiling for the position?
I still think that you want to find the tight end who does it all. Who is George Kittle, who at Iowa found a way to fall in love with blocking and the physicality, and is laughing his ass off as he's driving a DB 10 yards into the end zone, right? As he did to Ricardo Allen. And, George Kittle embodies everything that Shockey and Gronk and Ditka. He's everything rolled up into one. He's the new standard. The only problem is I don't know if Kittles grow on trees. They don't. From high school to college to the pros, that traditional tight end, and I use traditional in a weird way because it is always evolving, but just a tight end who does actually block once in a while is hard to find.
Yeah.
And I talked to a lot of personnel people. One of the scouts in this book, Mark Bruner, is in the book with his own chapter because he was such a throwback. I mean, he did kind of help the game just remain the game with the way he played for those Pittsburgh Steelers teams. And he loved to block, and he loved to just kind of take people on in that 12-round fight. But now he's a college scout for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Mark Bruner says there's just not a lot of players out there who are asked to do what I did. Maybe half of what he did. You almost have to kind of project, okay, a Pat Freiermuth, like he's willing, like we can see on film, he wants to do it. And then, okay, if that want to is there, we can teach him how to block a DN in space, because it's the want to and the technicalities of it. I mean, it's hard to block a DN, these pass rushers who are absolute freak shows. So I think it's a combination of like, all right, if guys at least have that want to, if they're put around the right coaches and around the right players, they can become a Kittle light. They can at least chase what George Kittle is. I think that's the goal. I still think teams want that. Now, who knows where it goes? The mainstream. I think Kyle Pitts, I know he's off to a rough start this season. I just talked to Kyle Pitts last week, actually. I'll have a story up at my website, golongtd.com, if people want to check it out. I think that's probably where it's going to end up going. It's just somebody who isn't quite a wide receiver, somebody who isn't quite a player that can live in the trenches, but they've got freakish athleticism, speed, and you're just going to throw them out there, out wide or in the slot, get him moving around and dare the defense to cover him one-on-one, right? Like, and then do what Tony Gonzalez did and have him pluck a football atop somebody's head or box somebody out or literally run away from your entire defense. That I think you're going to see more and more of that player, because that's what's in supply. High school to college to the pros, you're going to see more of these athletic, just freak shows at the tight end position who are schemed up to make a difference. And then you just hope they want to block and learn to block along the way, because if you have that unpredictability, like if Kyle Pitts is on the field right now, the Atlanta Falcons aren't calling a run play his direction, right? They're just not power, definitely not power. So if you can just somehow coach and teach that guy up, then you're going to see this position just enter a whole new stratosphere.
Yeah, I agree. Because obviously went to University of Michigan, and obviously I think no one puts more emphasis on the tight end position than Jim Harbaugh, and including Kirk Ferentz over at Iowa. They put a lot of emphasis on the tight end position, which I think is why one of the reasons schools like Notre Dame, schools like Iowa, schools like Michigan are constantly sending these kids to the NFL, because they're being coached in a certain way at the position that
Yeah.
translates to the NFL. So I think, in order for the position to continue to grow, we also have to look at the college level to make sure that they're getting those basics instilled in them earlier, so that when they get to the NFL level, the transition is much easier than, again, like you said, like a guy who's like a Kyle Pitts, who's like probably wasn't asked to do a lot of those things, blocking tight, blocking ends and stuff like that. Um, Tyler, before I let you go, man, again, the book is amazing. You do such an incredible job, humanizing these guys. And as a former player, man, I truly appreciate it. You give these guys stories, heart, and obviously the heart is still there, but it comes through so well on page that it's a wonderful read, man. And so I really appreciate the book. I appreciate you coming on. When is the book officially released? I like to think I'm special and I got like this advanced copy. I'm gonna go with that part. But when is the book release?
You are special. That's right. You did get the advanced copy. I love it. No, and thank you for your interest. And this has just been an awesome conversation. We got to talk offline because I want to get you on my podcast. I got some questions for
Absolutely,
you,
man.
Chris. But it's out today, October 18th, as we record this anyway. So it's out. Amazon is probably the best way to do it, right? We live off Amazon, but you can get the hard copy, you can get the Kindle, you can get the audio book, and obviously everywhere books are sold. The Blood and Guts is out there now. So no, I can't thank you enough, Chris. This has been awesome. And I really appreciate you because I think you just get what this book really is to its core. And it's not, if you love the X's and O's, there's a lot of that sprinkled in there.
Yeah.
Kellen Winslow and Don Coryell and what they did schematically to Tony Gonzalez really evolving the position. I think that's probably the climax of the book when he has that showdown with Mike Mularkey and things almost get physical. But it is more about life, and it is more about how, they save the position, but in saving the position, I think they tell us so much about how to live our own lives in any profession you could have in America. So thank you so much for getting that and taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I appreciate it. Well, folks, don't forget, the book is actually out today, even though the podcast will drop Thursday, but the book is out today. Make sure you get it. I promise you, you will not be disappointed in this book. If you're, I don't care if you're not even a sports fan, like you don't even have to be a sports fan to read this book to really draw a connection to it. But I absolutely love it. And Tyler, I appreciate it, man. And yeah, anytime you need me to come on the podcast, brother, I'm always willing and able. So just let me know when.
We'll make it happen, Chris. Thank you, and really appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome, folks. So again, don't forget to get the book. It's out now. The Blood and Guts: How the Tight End Saved This Position. Oh no, saved football. That's what it is. All right, Tyler. I appreciate it, man. Talk to you soon.
Absolutely, Chris. Hey, Duff, I got your email, so we'll stay in touch. I mean, it would be awesome to have you on.
Yeah, man. Anytime, brother.
Thanks.